What's up, guys? So today I wanted to take a moment to walk through one of the songs that I produced. It's this song called The Summer by The Way I Love You. Which is a buddy of mine named Ryan, and we've worked on all of his songs so far. And yeah, The Summer just got 100,000 streams recently. Ryan is just shy of 10,000 monthly listeners. Yeah, I thought I would do a video, just introduce you guys to the stuff that we've done, maybe get him above that 10K mark. But yeah, The Summer is a song that we did trying to blend this sort of modern indie pop aesthetic of like the band Camino and Nightly with more of like the OG like indie pop stuff, like the Black and White 1975 record. Like, can you blend those two together? So if you're interested in any of those bands, I think you will get some really good stuff. But also, again, just a quick disclaimer. Hi, my name is Seth. If you've never seen me before, I produce indie pop full time. If you're interested in doing an indie pop project, check out the top link in the description down below. So let's just jump into it. So I think one of the most standout parts of the song is the bass sound, which sounds like this. Which then in the chorus turns to this. This is probably what me and Ryan spent the most time tweaking, just because I feel like it is such a vital part of the song, and he had like a really distinct way he wanted it to sound. Like we were trying to mix almost modern indie pop sound with like The City from the 1975. So in the verse, we're using this Anna 2 preset called Basic Mini Pulse, which if I take all of the processing off, so dry, the bass actually sounds like this. So you can hear it's like a majority of the way there. So we just turned on these EQs. A lot of this was like creative mixing, like session by session. So there's definitely some consolidation that we probably could have done. Like there's this thing here that's not even being used right now. You're seeing messy session set. This is not the cleaned up version. But yeah, just used an EQ 8 to sort of darken it up a bit. And then I think we had a different session where we were really tweaking like the low, mid-range or high, low end of the track. And then we had another session where we just generally tone shaped it and then ended up throwing it into MoTT, which I love throwing on basses if I turn it off. Turn it on. Like it just kind of evens it out a little bit. The chorus basses, which again sound like this. Which these are actually two basses, Analog Lab. This patch called Holiday Bass. It's an OBX patch. It's just a really great like OB6 style, like 80s bass. And as you can see, I have a low bass and then the same bass an octave up, which I just did a little tone shaping on both of them and threw them into a group. And that's one of my favorite ways to try to get like a bite for a synth bass. I feel like this is one of those times where people can like really over engineer it, but really the solution is to just like produce it correctly. Because if you produce it correctly, then you don't have to over engineer it or like try to get an excessive amount of low end out of the high one or distort the low one to try to get some harmonics out of it. You can just like blend them however you want to use them. So this verse bass and these two chorus basses are all going into a group that has a lot of processing on it. So we'll just speed run it real quick through the chorus. So we have some compression, some transient shaper, a little bit of BX. Again, this is not like how I would ideally do it. Ideally, I would be using one EQ for a lot of these moves, but I think we had just spent multiple sessions sort of tweaking one thing at a time. And if somebody's just like on a call and they're like, can we like duck the like low end a little bit? My instinct is to just throw another EQ on it, which is not good. You shouldn't do that, but that's just what I do. And then we have a couple instances of R bass, one at 70 hertz, one at 128. Throwing it into a little bit of Saturn. And then a little bit of track spacer, sidechain to the kick drum, and really only focusing on this like low range. Just makes it get out of the way of the kick a little bit. Next, let's go to the guitars. We actually don't have a lot of guitars compared to what me and Ryan have done in the past. So we have this guy, which I think he just tracked himself. Which if I turn off all of my processing, it sounds originally like this. So yeah, I basically just threw a bunch of processing on it to make it this more nodal, like almost pad element. Actually, before I go into the guitars anymore, I should look at like the bus processing that I'm using. So some EQ with a little bit of automation. There's some sections like this where we want that low pass filter to just come down a little bit more, but then in other sections it comes up. A big part of this sound for me personally is having two compressors, one side chained to the kick, one side chained to the snare, that are just like ducking everything. I personally like having them on two separate compressors because what I've found is the kick, I can get away with a bit of a shorter release because, at least in this style of music, the snare is normally this like there's a lot of sustain to it. So sometimes I need to make the release a little bit longer specifically for the snare. And then used a lot of this like de-harsh preset on Soothe too. And then there's this ROM reverb. The ending of the song, we wanted more of like a ring out. So I just threw this ROM reverb on the guitar bus and just had it automate up. And then a little bit of track spacer to make it play nicer with the main vocal. I feel like the like resonant frequencies in this like lower mid range, that tends to be where a lot of the clashing tends to happen. It tends to not be, at least for me, in like the high end. It's mainly here. So go really low ratio and then just high pass and low pass to the exact range you want to get it. But yeah, so now that I've covered all of that, we can go back to going through the guitars. Underneath that first one we looked at, we have these two just sort of 1975 plucky guys. Both of those guys were probably just using my Strat. Andy in a bottle preset, hard to go wrong with it. A little bit of channel EQ, but yeah, just EQ'd it out of the way. I feel like these layers can be like really percussive, and it doesn't really matter if they're like a little bit tinny or like lack a lot of low end because they're not really there for like the low end meat. And then this was a stage where I was using like compression, limiting, and OTT. I probably wouldn't use that anymore, if I'm being honest. I feel like I could have gotten away with just not using the compressor and just use the limiter and OTT. For me, OTT is more of like a frequency tool than it is like a dynamics tool. And then we have these two guys, which are just little slappy dudes on Vision of the Crystal Clean in Rabia archetype, little bit of Tal chorus, some EQ. Again, this chain that I probably wouldn't be using anymore. But they kind of add like a little bit of a slap going into the downbeat. And then we have the solo, which I think is spread over like 4 different tracks. Just being transparent, this is probably like the dumbest way to make this guitar sound happen. I think I made it for like one of them, and then I just slowly started like duplicating it out and didn't realize it and whatever. So at its core, so this tone at its core is just one of these guys, which is a little bit of metatune. I feel like if you have like single note solos, it can make it a little bit cleaner. But yeah, we're using this Downtown Brown preset in Rabia archetype. A little bit of Juno chorus. And then this is where it got really weird. I just realized that I wasn't using LFOs in Ableton enough, so I threw on a kilohertz ring mod, which sounds like this. And then I added an LFO to the frequency, which kind of shifts it a little bit. And then a channel EQ and a delay. Which is like the dumbest way you could like make this chain happen, because then I duplicate it for the other side and have them both playing. But then I wanted to get a little bit more girth under the solo, so I just duplicated it and shifted them an octave down, which is like really grating on the ears if you solo it out too much. But when you put them all together with other guitars, it's honestly still a little grating, but with the rest of the track, like they fill up this really meaty mid-range hold that's like a little bit prevalent in like the 2 to 4K range. But I feel like when you add all of the effects on top of that, it works. And I would not recommend remaking this chain in this way. If I had to remake it, I would probably do it in a different way, but this is just what ended up happening on the final record. We then have some synth stuff, which honestly, a lot of this is based off of the pre-pro that Ryan did. So I think that these are both Serum presets. a majority of the track, we just kind of kept them the same as they were in the demo. A little bit of tweaks like some OTT, some decap, but it's not even that crazy. And then some one knob pumper and some delay. So it's actually a pretty simple sound. I actually can't take credit for that. I think Ryan just used that as like the main songwriting element. And then for the other synths that we have going, I'll just go to the end here. So we'll just go through these real quickly. This first one is this sound called Broadcast. It's part of the OBX library. I think probably the thing that is making this session chug so hard is just the processing I did with it in a VCV rack, which looks like it is just going to some mutable instruments style, like Clouds replica. And then each one of those outputs, because it's a stereo effect, are going to these like old vintage flangers that have slightly different settings, which have like slightly different delay times. And then those are going back into it, which adds some like really cool textures to it. If I turn it off, the lead sounds like this. If I turn it on, it sounds like this. Just makes it a little bit sparklier, a little bit of delay. Just wanted to make it sound weird. This is a pad that Ryan had from the old demo, which originally sounded like this. So the way this is set up right now is outputs are going to these like tape delay things that are on like different speeds, and they have like different LFOs controlling the speeds. And then the outputs of those are going into a reverb. So it sounds like this. You can make really any sound into like an ambient pad if you just use VCV rack correctly. And then we have this ARP. Is another OBX patch. It's called ACD2 Water Piano. I think we did a version of this track where it didn't feel 80s enough, and so I just threw the OBX on just everything. But yeah, as you can see, I'm just kind of holding these like longer notes because I actually like having arpeggios be triggered via Ableton's arpeggiator. So if I turn that off, it sounds like this. I'm more comfortable with this arpeggiator, and it's more like a universal thing because then I can make anything an arpeggiator and I know how the settings work. Whereas if I try to use like the arpeggiator that's like built into individual synths, I have to like figure it out. Also, you can see there's some sections where we're automating the cutoff of this ARP. So automation is always fun. And then here is what I'm just calling like a blanket, like pad group that's really just broken into 3 parts. All right, so if I turn off the bus processing, it sounds like this. So you can hear a lot of it's coming from this like chopped pulsing pad thing that Ryan had. And then I threw in a couple of arcade patches, acoustic textures, which is the one that I use all the time. Basically, I took this sound, bandpassed it, so it was just this narrow frequency range that I liked. Added one knob pumper to give it some movement. And then threw in some ROM reverb. And then I think I did that again with a different patch. So all of those guys are going into a bus that has some decapitator on it. I think I literally had just gotten decapitator because I was really late to the game. I only got it like a year and a half ago. Some EQs, some more one knob pumper, then side chaining it to the kick and the snare. With just a lot of fun layers. And then we have some sound effects, just your standard like crap ton of risers, crap tons of like crashes or impacts. Just some cool stuff. Also, there was just this awesome sample that I found called Butt Slappy. And I wanted to use it, even though I don't think I needed to use it, but I found it in a sample pack and wanted to use it. And then, yeah, all the drums for this are Luke Holland mix wave. It's kind of become my standard at this point. Only real special processing that I'm using right now is a little bit of glue compression on the bus. On the snare, I do have a little bit of Fresh Air and Valhalla vintage verb, which sound like this. And without them, I've since started using a gated reverb on like the snare as like a send, like throwing it to a send out in the room. But I don't know. I feel like I wanted to have the sound of like the send going back into the bus. And Ableton is for some reason really bad at that. Like it's really bad at using effect sends and then routing that effect send into like a track. Like it adds like some weird like delay thing, and I couldn't get around it, so I just did it that way. But yeah, not a whole lot else. There was a tambourine. And then in the verses / pre-chorus, we had this sort of like synth drum breakdown. Here, which are like this weird percussion layer. All that is Andrew Huang a long time ago. He's a YouTuber and he's a music producer and he's a Canadian YouTuber. And a long time ago, he released a sample pack of like Canadian sounds. And so if I turn off all of the effects, it's just a bunch of samples of him like hitting the side of like a hockey stick or like a pair of skates. Yeah, I just threw some decapitator, some EQ on those, and they sounded like this. And then when you throw the effects sends on them, it just added this like really cool movement. And then like I showed in the chorus, there's some like Oliver like some trap loops in the chorus. They're buried under there, but they just kind of add like a little bit of like a swagger to it. And then here's the vocals.
We drank too much. You were my lover for a little while. Now you're gone with the summer. So sweet, it hurts. Your hands under my t-shirt. Won't be another. I wish you could stay, but you're gone with the summer. Won't be.
A lot of parts to it. Here's like the main vocal.
You were my lover.
Here's some ad libs. A smattering of Decapitator and Valhalla Vintage Verb and a bunch of other things. For certain sections, I wanted to use a vocoder. So what I did was I rendered out the vocal and threw in some vocal synths. Triggering it off of some MIDI hidden above it. I felt like for this track, having like a vocoder that was like really low relative to the main vocal worked really well. If I brought it up a little bit more, it didn't really work as much. The way that I was format shifting it, if I brought it up too much, it would start like blending with the main vocal. And then we have some dubs.
Too much. You were my lover for a little while.
Then we have the harmonies.
White hot blood.
And then the coolest part is I took a section of one of the vocals. I don't remember where it was. I think it might have been this guy because it's rendered out, but I rendered it out and then I threw it into Simpler in Ableton and turned it into this like little chop. So if I turn off all of the send effects and all of this stuff here, it sounds like... And there is really no science to making a chop like this. You just kind of have to like pick a section that has like a bunch of like good notes in it and then just kind of chuck it around and then mess around until you find something nice. So we threw on some little alter boy just to like lower it a few cents and make it a little bit more growlier. Also adding a little bit of drive. Band passing it. Some arc comp. Some decapitator, and this is on punish almost all the way, and then the mix is brought down. Then I threw it into some pan flow on a slower speed, just to give it some variation because I knew I was throwing it into a delay. It just has like a really weird way of reacting with like this stereo delay. And then the rest of the effects sends. And yeah, I think that's basically everything. In terms of effects sends, I'm just using this Valhalla Vintage Verb big ambience with a little bit of EQ to shape it, and then some track spacer to, again, pull down some of the mid-range in it. And then it looks like I had a ROM reverb doing the same thing. But yeah, all of that put together sounds like this. But yeah, that's what everything sounds like. Again, thank you to Ryan for being a buddy. Let me produce his song for him because it was really fun to do. But yeah, if you guys want to support Ryan, go check the song out on Spotify. I'll link it in the description. And go check out the other stuff that Ryan's put out because I have also worked on those things. And yeah, I will see you guys next week.